Welcome back. Another long mission here. The raw video was over half an hour long, though I've tried to cut down on that by moving parts when nothing happens and speeding up sections which are mostly dodging around missiles, so the actual video is a bit shorter. In terms of the goal, well, we're escorting the victory with Flint, but in actual fact the victory is
attack my target.
Never really attacked in this mission, making it just a simple dogfight. This first engagement is 4 Darkets in 2 wing pairs. I've sent Flint to attack the one on the right while I get the one on the left. Normally these guys are in a straight line with each other, but here they broke away very fast, which is why I ended up firing it off for a while. They usually carry on more in a straight line. Not that it matters hugely, because hey, these are Darkets. You can get away with a couple of mistakes and still end up with a fighter in perfect condition after you're done with it. You saw part of the reason this mission takes so long, which is that the enemy starts usually quite a long way away from you, and the Corvette here, which you might have seen in the distance, is actually flying away from you as well. So by the time I finish with these Darkets, it'll actually be a very long way away, and it takes almost 2 minutes to fly over there. That decision doesn't make any sense with any kind of logic, not game design, not military. I mean, it's only got short-range weapons, why would it be flying away from the victory, which has to be its target? I mean, a Corvette alone isn't a match for the victory, and 4 Darkets aren't a match for 2 Hellcats either, but if you assume that all the Kilrathi are really trying to do is slow the victory down so that other forces can catch up, which is pretty clearly the case given that there's lots of fighters fairly strung out here. Also, check out my accuracy here. Like I say, you can get away with mistakes against Darkets, so I don't mind the fact that my occasional moments of utter uselessness come against light fighters. If they came against more dangerous enemies, they might not have got through the mission. Anyway, so the Corvette running away from the victory doesn't make sense from military logic or Kilrathi perspective. I mean, the Kilrathi running away from an enemy come off it. It doesn't make sense from a game design perspective either. Flint and I here are demonstrating how you take on a Corvette when you've got a wingman. You order put them on my wing by opposing the distance, so the two of you hit it together. And then it's a case of driving hard at the position where the Tachyon turret is in the rear, so that's where the ITTS reticle is here, and you can see the grey streaks, and we're both firing at it, and usually you manage to destroy the turret before the Corvette goes down, but even if you don't, what you do is you keep your attack up until the turrets switch fire from your wingman to you, so that neither fighter receives enemy fire for long enough that it's enough to get through the shields. And then in time, which is to say approximately now, I think, the Corvette will eventually go down. Like so. The Corvette isn't a major threat on its own, so why you should send it away from the protection of its fighters, and away from any help you give to its fighters, I just don't know.
Attack my target.
Roger that.
But Origin clearly loved the idea, because not only did they have that one, but 50% of the time you get exactly the same set of enemies, 4 Darkets and a Corvette, which is again flying away from the victory, as your next set of enemies. And sometimes it doesn't happen, you just skip straight to these Quadralphi, but that's even more inexplicable in some ways, because nothing says originality like repeating the exact same enemy. Anyway, on to these 4 Dralfi, and of course 4 Dralfi means missiles. So I spend a fair amount of time here dodging around them, which is why I just sped that section up a bit. Also, meaning you get to see what Kilrathi taunts sound like sped up by a factor of 2. I think they sound like working class Northern English, to some extent, but then again I am Northern English, so that might explain why I think that. Well, mostly, I've spent so long living in the south these days that my accent is a bit all over the place, but I regard myself as a Yorkshireman. Good to see Flint shipping in. She tends to do that. It's one of the big differences between Flint and wingmen like Maniac or Flash, is that while Flint maybe won't get so many kills at the start of a mission with missiles, though she's pretty good with them, but she will carry on shipping in with kills throughout the game. Which I tend to regard as more reliable and more useful. There's a couple of other reasons why you might prefer to fly with Flint. One of those is willingness to obey orders. You see, I've been ordering attack my target rather than break an attack in this mission, and that's because Flint will obey those orders, and so I can control which fighter she attacks. That's actually going to be pretty important with this next set of enemies, because if I ordered a break and attack here, Flint would go after the Corvette. And if I was flying with Maniac, there would be nothing I could do about it.
Attack my target.
But as it is, I can order Flint to attack the Dralfy, and she will. And then when she's finished with that fighter, she will go after the Corvette. Which is fine, because I'll either be keeping the other one busy or have already destroyed it, so she'll be there to attack. And that's pretty important, because when an AI pilot's attacking a capital ship with other fighters and attendants, they do often take quite a lot of damage. And we've got plenty more enemies coming out, and I'd quite like Flint's fighter in perfect condition, or as near to it as I can get. The final reason why I like Flint for this mission has to do with something that came up in the thread recently, and which I've been meaning to talk about at some point, so now's as good a time as any, and that's how the game does Wingman's survivability. In Wing Commander 1, any of your wingmen could die at any time, and if that happened, then any conversations that involved them just wouldn't happen. The sequel, Wing Commander 2, went the other way entirely, and wingmen could only die during scripted events that killed them. On any other occasions, they were checked. So, Wing Commander 3 tried to thread the needle a bit and go between those two. Wingmen in Wing Commander 3 all start off the game protected. Their ship takes lethal damage, they will eject. As the game goes on, each of them gets an at-risk flag set, after which they can be killed in combat. Now, the position of that at-risk flag depends on the wingman. The more cautious the wingman's flying style is supposed to be. As I've indicated, the actual level of caution in a lot of cases is pretty similar. The wingman will make fairly similar decisions. The more cautious that they in theory are, then the later in the game is that their flag gets set to at risk. Now, without looking it up, I did not know when it was that the most reckless wingmen, Maniac and Flash, get their at-risk flag set. Now, I have, since recording this video, looked it up, and it in fact isn't for another couple of missions yet. But what I definitely knew is that Flint's was not set yet. So Flint's not currently set to at risk, and in fact she won't be for quite some time. So, in a long mission like this, I don't have to worry too much about keeping her alive, because I know that even if she does eject, she won't be killed by that, she'll definitely survive it. The flip side of which I will discuss in a bit, I think, because there's mission-related stuff to talk about right now. I didn't think that you needed to see Flint and I kill a Corvette again. It was exactly the same tactics as the previous one, so, yeah. There are normally 4 Vaktoths in this wave. Well, actually that's not true. If you've lost your wingmen by the time you get to this point, there are 2 Vaktoths in this wave, otherwise there are 4. But what happened there is that 2 of them collided with each other. This sort of thing amuses me, which is why I picked this video for the mission one. Well, one of the reasons anyway. I do also think that there's quite good flying in this video, as will be evidenced by how long this Vaktoth lasts. Despite the fact that it is in excellent condition at the moment, it is in fact not long for this world. This small section of space. Science fiction plays havoc on metaphors which assume that you're on a planet. The other reason that I think this one went fairly well is that I don't take very much damage. The damage you can see at the moment is about the limit of what goes wrong. Damage is a bit of a funny thing in these games though. I mean, to some extent you could argue that the only part of damage that actually matters is the bit that takes you from extremely shot up to destroyed. Well, that's not quite exactly true, since your performance is eroded as the damage mounts. There is more than a grain of truth in the idea, because you never see any effect from bringing back an extremely damaged fighter as far as the game's concerned. A pristine, no-paint-scratched fighter is equivalent to one which barely lands and then probably falls apart when Rachel takes the engine cover off or something. I do wonder if there'd be there would have been any appetite for a game where damage counts and where the responsibilities of the Wing Commander actually fell on you, rather than merely just calling the game Wing Commander, where you might have to plot mission routes, see where to send your fighters, who to assign to what missions, that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, okay, XCOM Interceptor was released and attempted to be a bit like that, but there's two reasons why that isn't really what I'm talking about. One is the Interceptor had the sort of balancing the book side of things, which is a bit silly for a carrier Wing Commander in the position we find ourselves in, because, well, he doesn't care about the relative cost of HS and ion missiles, he just wants to have his wing operating at max efficiency. And the other and more important factor is simply the fact that Interceptor sucked. The flight engine was just incredibly bad. Yeah, I've played Interceptor, I don't recommend it, it's just really, really, really bad. No part of flying a fighter in that game is fun. No matter what other parts of a space game you have, the combat engine is the most important part of it, and if it's bad, it's bad. Anyway, new wave here, 2 Darkits, 2 Vector. Basic plan is to finish off the Darkits with missiles, and then we've got 2 Vector against 2 Hellcats again, so I can just do what I did last time. Wouldn't be how I'd normally approach this. Normally I save my missiles for the 4 Vector wave, but since they decided to make it easy for me by colliding with each other, I now have to save some missiles, so I will be doing this instead. And there's 2 Darkits here and 4 Darkits in the next wave, which, being satisfying targets to hit with missiles, since they explode when it happens, I will use my missiles on. Just going back to my previous thread conversation about actually, making the Wing Commander and Wing Commander mean something. I guess you could make it a standoff, given that it made you care about how many fighters you had left. Or at least it tried to make you care about how many fighters you had left, but it didn't really, because you got replacement waves so many times that practically you never had to worry about running out of fighters. It would have been quite interesting to have to deal with that aspect of limited resources in the game, though you could argue that it is already hard enough. Obviously there wasn't much the standoff team could have done about trying to treat damaged and undamaged ships differently without access to the game's code. That would have been quite a major modification. But it would certainly have changed some of my flying style if it had been the case that when you brought back a wrecked fighter, then you can't use it for a while and you have a set amount of time between missions. Because, I mean, Wing Commander 3 is a bit less to a tight time scale, but there's some times where it's fairly obvious that there's not much time between missions. Wing Commander 4, you're running on a very tight schedule, and, well, I'll talk about it a bit more during the game, because I think that occasionally the plot there is a little unrealistic about how rapidly Blair gets his fighters turned around. But anyway, the point would be that if you brought back a total fighter in that game, and sometimes in this game, there would not certainly be enough time to get it repaired and launched for the next engagement. Okay, so I'm assuming that there's a certain limit to how fast you can repair a fighter. Of course, 27th century technology might mean that it's rather less of a limit than I'm expecting, but on the other hand, Wing Commander setting doesn't really have all that much in the way of 27th century technology in it. I mean, they just picked a number out of thin air, really. There's no real sign of 27th century technology in Wing Commander, so I don't think it's an issue we have to bring up much. I suppose to some extent, to a lot of people, and there's no evidence that Christopher Blair is particularly scientifically inclined, a lot of modern technology is a black box where you push buttons and it does what you tell it to. So our relationship with technology in Wing Commander being pretty much exactly that isn't all that surprising, but even so, there's a lot of technology that probably should exist, but a lot of things where things should appear to be more futuristic than they actually are, and they don't. Technology in Wing Commander 3, as I remarked in the thread, it only really exists as a means to wage war or an obstacle to waging war. Anyway, enough about Wing Commander 3's lack of credentials as actual science fiction, since it's not really a topic that interests me that much. Another wave of enemies here. These last 4 Darkits are all that stands between me and mission accomplished. Well, theoretically. This mission's victory conditions are a bit bugged. The actual mission accomplished message only seems to play if you kill the Darkits fast enough that the victory is still at the jump point. rather than having continued on the course and speed it arrived at the jump point at, and then it's miles away from the jump point, and so you don't get a mission accomplished unless you kill everything really quick, which I have done because I set the game to rookie and killed everything in the mission in 9 minutes flat, and then I got a mission accomplished message, which I don't get in this game, though I will splice it in because I have killed everything and the victory is just fine. So I have met all the mission objectives, the game is just refusing to acknowledge this. Anyway, you might have noticed plenty ejected there. I think basically she's run out of afterburner fuel, and that makes missiles somewhat harder to dodge. I can't pick her up or anything like we would be able to in Wing Commander 2. Partly that's just because I'm in a Hellcat, which doesn't have a rear turret, so there would be no tractor beam even in Wing Commander 2, but there's no tractor beams in Wing Commander 3 anyway. That was an unusual missile for this LP, since I fired it without caring whether or not it would hit. It was only shot to get that fighter off my back while I finished the other one off, and then I could deal with this guy without any interruptions. So yeah, you can't pick them up in Wing Commander 3. Whether they live or die is just at-risk status, basically. And since nobody's at risk right now, I don't have to worry about those sort of help me out messages. But once that starts being the case, I'll have to pay more attention to those and start sending people home and even going to help them in extreme cases or when dealing with Maniac, which is most the same thing. Of course, Maniac won't obey a go-home order, so I won't have much choice there. Anyway, we're done here. As I said, it won't be a mission accomplished message, but I have spliced in the winning ending because I did, after all, win the mission. All the mission objectives have been accomplished. There's no actual difference in the game. I go to exactly the same mission next, whether I win or lose the mission.
Need clearance, TCS Victory.
You're cleared, Colonel. Captain says to inform you we got company coming. I sure hope it's young, female, and pretty.
And that's that for this mission. So, thanks for watching. I've been Alanin. This has been Wing Commander 3 Heart of the Tiger. And join me next time when we have a saviour coming from Combat Command.
Wipe that sad sack look off your face, Ace. She made it.